September 1931, Gauley Bridge, West Virginia. Somewhere deep inside Gauley Mountain, a man named Vertner Watts stopped drilling. Not because the shift was over, not because his foreman told him to. He stopped because he could not breathe. The tunnel walls around him were white, not with paint, not with mineral dust settling naturally in the dark, white with silica. Raw, crystalline, pulverized into a fog so dense the headlamps of the men around him had turned into pale ghosts 10 feet away. The air tasted like chalk and metal. It coated the back of the throat. It lined the inside of the nose. It went somewhere deeper than that, somewhere a man could not cough it back out. Vertner Watts had been inside this mountain for 14 months. He was 31 years old. He did not know yet that his lungs were already turning to stone. He reported to the company doctor the following morning. The doctor examined him for 4 minutes, wrote something on a form, told him he had a cold, sent him back to the tunnel. Union Carbide had a schedule to keep. In the summer of 1930, the new Kanawha Power Company, a subsidiary of Union Carbide and Carbon Corporation, began drilling a tunnel through Gauley Mountain near the town of Gauley Bridge, West Virginia. The stated purpose was hydroelectric power diversion, redirect the flow of the new river through 3.75 miles of mountain to feed a power turbine at the base. Simple, industrial, profitable. What Union Carbide's geological surveys had already confirmed before a single man descended into the rock was that Gauley Mountain contained one of the richest deposits of nearly pure silica in the eastern United States. Silica content inside the tunnel would run as high as 99.4% in certain sections. Pure silica, when drilled and blasted, becomes a suspended crystalline powder fine enough to pass directly through the membranes of the human lung. The company knew this before they hired the first man. They hired nearly 5,000. Most of them were black workers from the American South, brought north by labor recruiters who offered wages of 25 to 50 cents per hour in a region where men were desperate and questions were dangerous. They were housed in company camps along the river, segregated, controlled, dependent on Union Carbide for food, shelter, and the thin fiction that the work they were doing was survivable. The drilling began in March of 1930. By autumn, men were dying. At peak operations, 3 shifts ran inside Gauley Mountain around the clock. The foreman carried stopwatches. The tunnel had a schedule, and the schedule did not accommodate ventilation breaks. Standard mining practice required 15 to 30 minutes of ventilation between blasting and re-entry, time enough for the silica cloud to settle or clear. Union Carbide's foremen were documented ordering re-entry within 5 minutes of blasting, sometimes less. The men who refused were fired. The men who complained were replaced. There were always more recruits arriving from the south. Inside the tunnel, the conditions were specific and documented. Drills ran without water suppression, a standard technique that wets the silica dust and prevents it from becoming airborne. Water suppression slowed the drilling. Drilling speed determined the bonus pay of the foreman. The foremen made their choice, and they made it in writing, in shift logs that Union Carbide would later claim did not exist. The workers wore no respirators. Respirators were available. Union Carbide purchased them for certain supervisory staff. The workers on the drills, the men in the densest silica clouds, were not issued them. A foreman named Reinhardt Dennis, who supervised the deepest section of the tunnel in the winter of 1930, later testified before Congress that he had personally seen workers collapse at their drills and be carried out of the mountain. He testified that the company doctor who visited the camps had been instructed to list the cause of illness as pneumonia, not silicosis, pneumonia, because pneumonia was not a compensable occupational disease in West Virginia. Silicosis was. The paper trail was being managed before the bodies were cold. By the spring of 1931, the dying had accelerated past anything that could be quietly contained. Men who had been strong and capable 18 months earlier were now unable to climb a flight of stairs. The progression of advanced silicosis, what the workers themselves called tunnelitis, a word they invented because no one had given them the real one, was documented by the company's own medical staff. Rapid weight loss, productive cough, then dry cough, then no breath for coughing. The chest cavity filling with fibrous tissue that hardened around the air sacs until breathing became a mechanical impossibility. Men in their 20s and 30s dying the way men in their 80s died of natural causes, except faster and in pain, and knowing exactly what had been done to them. The workers began dying faster than the local infrastructure could absorb. The town of Gowley Bridge had a cemetery. The cemetery had a policy. The policy, as recorded in local testimony and later confirmed in congressional hearings, was that the black workers from the tunnel camps would not be buried there. Not in marked graves, not with family notified, not with any record that connected the death to the mountain. Union Carbide contracted with a local landowner named Frank Lynch to use a section of a cornfield outside Summersville as a burial site. The workers, those who could not be sent back to their home counties quickly enough, were loaded onto flatbed trucks at night and buried in unmarked rows in Lynch's field. No headstones, no family notification in most cases, no death certificates that named the real cause. The paperwork said pneumonia. The cornfield said something else entirely. The exact number of men buried in Lynch's field has never been established. Estimates from researchers and the workers' families range from 169 to over 500. The field has never been fully excavated. In 1936, a congressional subcommittee convened to investigate what had happened at Hawk's Nest Tunnel. The hearings lasted 3 days. Workers testified. Families testified. Reinhardt Dennis testified. The company doctor who had been writing pneumonia on the death certificates testified. Union Carbide sent its lawyers. The lead counsel for Union Carbide at the 1936 hearings was a man named Charles Caverly. He had been retained specifically to manage the company's exposure, and he managed it with precision. Every death total presented by the workers' representatives was challenged. Every medical testimony was countered with company physicians who disputed the silicosis diagnosis. Every foreman's testimony about re-entry times was met with affidavits from other foremen who remembered it differently. Caverly's central argument was elegant in its coldness. The company had complied with all applicable safety standards in West Virginia. This was technically accurate. West Virginia had no applicable silica safety standards. Union Carbide had helped ensure that remained the case. Charles Caverly billed Union Carbide $4,200 for his work at the 1936 hearings. The subcommittee issued no binding recommendations. No executive was charged. No foreman was prosecuted. The tunnel had been operational since 1931. It was still generating power for Union Carbide's chemical plants when the hearings concluded. The company's stock price that quarter was the highest it had been since 1929. The workers received a settlement. The individual amounts paid to the families of the dead ranged from $30 to $400. $30 for a man's lungs. For a man drilled into a mountain and buried in a cornfield without his name on a stone. Union Carbide's lawyers were paid more per hour than the men who drilled the tunnel earned in a month. The men who drilled it are in an unmarked cornfield. The lawyers retired on full pension. Vertner Watts, the man who stopped drilling in September of 1931 because he could not breathe, never went back into the mountain. The company doctor who told him he had a cold and sent him back to work saw him twice more before the end of 1931. The second visit, the doctor wrote nothing on the form. The third visit, Watts could not walk to the clinic unassisted. He died in February of 1932. He was 32 years old. His death certificate listed pneumonia. His name does not appear in Union Carbide's official incident records. Those records were reviewed by the Congressional Subcommittee in 1936. His name was not raised. It is not in the hearing transcripts. The form the company doctor filled out in September of 1931, the one that sent him back to the silica cloud, has never been located. The official death toll attributed to Hawk's Nest Tunnel, the number Union Carbide acknowledged before Congress, was 109. The number submitted by the workers' legal representatives at the same hearings was 476. Researchers who have examined burial records, death certificates, and family testimony in the decades since place the figure higher still. Some as high as 2,000 when accounting for workers who died in the years following their employment after returning to their home counties in Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, far from any investigator's reach. The gap between 109 and 2,000 has never been officially explained. Gowley Bridge, West Virginia, today. The tunnel still runs through the mountain. It still diverts the New River. It still generates power. The cornfield outside Summersville, where Frank Lynch allowed Union Carbide to bury its workers, has never been formally designated as a burial site. There is no memorial. There is no marker visible from the road. Researchers who have tried to survey the property have encountered ownership disputes, county record gaps, and, in at least 2 documented cases, missing deed records for the relevant parcel covering the years between 1930 and 1940. Whether those records were lost, misfiled, or removed from the county clerk's office is a question the county clerk's office has declined to answer in writing. The last FOIA request filed on the parcel, submitted in 2019 by a researcher at West Virginia University, received a partial response. 2 of the 4 requested document sets were returned. 2 were listed as unavailable. The reason given was routine archival attrition. Whether that is accurate or whether someone, at some point, decided that certain paper trails were better left incomplete is a question that has not been answered in public. The power line that runs from the base of Gowley Mountain still carries current. On a quiet day, near the water intake, you can hear the river moving through the rock. The mountain does not move. The men inside it do not move either. Most of them were never given the chance to leave.